conductive wire, and you were so electric. I had no say when you came so near, and just passed right through me.
Hey everyone, welcome to Geekdom is Back. Today I am joined once again by Becky Rice and Shane Conard. We are not talking about Lost today, believe it or not, but instead we're talking about Josie and the Pussycats, which is a movie that I always want to call Josie and the Pussycat Dolls because that makes sense. But Becky and Shane, how are you doing today?
That one really got me.
Yeah, I was going for something too. John Locke and the Pussycats. I don't know. I tried to make a crossover there. It didn't work.
I wouldn't be surprised if we find some way to pull in Lost.
Wouldn't surprise me either.
Yeah, it'll come to me. We've got some time. I got some time to work this out.
Give us some time.
So, Josie and the Pussycats. This is a movie I had not seen before.
It's the greatest movie of all time.
But I kind of knew bits and pieces from it. I don't know where I saw bits and pieces of it, but it feels like one of those movies that eventually was just on TV all the time at some point. So that is probably why. But you two have both watched this multiple times, yes?
So I have a pretty long history with this. I have always been an ardent supporter of this movie. Well, I don't know that I should say always. I think that when I was 11 when this movie came out. And so I don't think that I was a heavy defender of this film until maybe I was in college. But I did like it as soon as I saw it. But the older that I got, the more that I understood it and appreciated it on a deeper level. And I actually introduced Shane to this film. And so I believe that Shane has seen this movie twice now.
Yes, twice. So I saw it once virtually with Becky, and then I saw it a second time about 2 hours ago.
Perfect.
So it's
nice
fresh.
And fresh. I can't tell you when I watched this because I just watched it whenever Becky was like, let's do a Josie podcast. And I was like, okay, I'll watch it. And then it's months later now and we're finally doing the episode. So hopefully you two will know this better than I do. But I want to start by talking about the cast because
it's so good.
There are so many great people in this. You have Rachel Lee Cook, Rosario Dawson, Tara Reid, Gabriel Mann, Paulo Costanzo, Missy Pyle, Alan Cumming, Parker Posey, and so many other people that you've kind of seen in things over the years, but they're not necessarily main characters in this. So it's just fun to get those appearances.
Even in the very first scene, when there's the teenage fan, I immediately recognized him.
Is it Justin Chapman?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, first two things that came into mind is I'm pretty sure that he's in Shameless. I think he's that dude. I think that's the boy of interest in the first season of Shameless. But then I remember him from War of the Worlds.
Yeah, it's funny because the Megastore DJ, I have down in here that he was in a Stephen King adaptation. Actually, not really an adaptation. It was a made-for-TV thing that was based off some Dutch TV show or something called Kingdom Hospital, and it's the most random Stephen King fact I could come up with to tie it into this podcast as well.
Perfect.
Crossover.
Got to stay on brand.
Mm-hmm.
Becky, what are your thoughts on this cast overall?
The cast is insane. I don't think that at the time of watching it, I realized how big of a deal that was, right? Tara Reid was pretty famous for various reasons, Rachel Lee Cook, very popular in late 90s, early 2000s movies. This is really early, people getting to know Rosario Dawson. And then other than that, I was everybody in Du Jour for the most part is fairly well known, fairly famous. But I was just oh, okay, cool. Famous people are in this movie. I don't think that it occurred to me at that time, how rare that is to have such a stacked cast. And I remember rewatching it definitely when I was in my 20s and looking back and being wow, they got really big people in this film. And I think everybody is just absolutely excellent in every way.
I just want to add too, I love that when they're talking about they're introducing the government agents to Fiona's operation, they use a celebrity to talk about how they use their propaganda. And that giant celebrity that they get is Eugene Levy. And I think it's so funny.
Yeah, and a fun fact about the casting, Rosario actually beat out Beyonce, Aaliyah, and Lisa Lopez for this role.
I did read that, yeah.
Which is kind of crazy.
That's wild to me.
Because like those people actually sing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like to play that what if game. Can you imagine the releasing of this film if it had been Aaliyah, for example, like instead of Rosario Dawson? Because Aaliyah died in August of the same year that this movie came out, I believe, right? 2001.
I think so.
And then this movie came out in like April. So like it still would have released just fine, but like imagine,
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I'm just curious, like if this movie would have, what the legacy of this film would have been.
And Lisa Lopez also died almost exactly a year after this released.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was like, I know that was like in a really similar time frame. That's wild.
Yeah.
I did not know that like either of them were in the running.
All three of them had auditioned for it, and I guess they just liked Rosario better, which is still kind of crazy.
That's definitely wild to me. I mean, I get it. She's incredible in this movie. My brain is just like, whoa.
It's funny too, because I've mostly seen Rosario in more recent stuff, as opposed to having known about her career prior to like some more recent stuff. So for me, I was like, oh, this is kind of where she got her start. And I had absolutely no idea.
I mean, it is, because after this, I guess it would have been like Men in Black 2. I don't know why that made me laugh, but it did. Like big cinematic masterpiece, like Oscar award winning art cinema, Men in Black 2. But then she was in Rent. And then the same year that Rent came out, was that Sin City? And then like Clerks and Clerks 2. So this was really the beginning. Also, as I say those things out loud, what an interesting like career that she's had.
Yeah,
like in a lot of ways, like it makes sense. And then randomly she'll do like these other things that kind of are a little bit different than that. She's definitely somebody that I think that fans really love and have really like attached themselves to. I don't know. Am I allowed to talk about The Mandalorian?
Always.
I don't know. Like, I don't want anybody to listen to this and be like, oh yeah, spoilers. If you nerds haven't watched The Mandalorian yet, go watch it. God. But yeah, like the push for Rosario Dawson to play a live action version of Ahsoka Tano was years long. Like that movement started way before like anybody even knew The Mandalorian was going to be a live action show or exist. Like this has just been something that fans have been like talking about on the internet for years. And then it finally happened. Like she's definitely somebody that like ever since she really kind of like got onto the scene as an actress, people have just like flocked to and fallen in love with. But she's never like the leading lady, right?
Right.
But she is an incredible supporting actress, and I would do anything for her.
Yeah, and everyone in this cast just plays their role so perfectly. It's like everyone is firing on all cylinders, and I think if you even had just one person slip up, this movie wouldn't be as entertaining as it is.
I was thinking about all three of them were cast kind of perfectly.
Yeah, definitely the three of them are absolutely perfect. Like
I don't think
Tara
that
Reid,
better Josie.
Oh yeah, no, I cannot imagine anybody other than Rachel Lee Cook playing Josie in this movie.
I don't know if I've seen Rachel Lee Cook in anything else, but I looked into it and I was correct. I've never seen anything else that she's in.
You've never seen the music video for Dress to Kill? Like the New Found Glory song?
Oh.
I
I didn't realize that was her.
Of all the things that she's done in her career, that's the one thing that I decided to mention. I mean, I can understand you like not having seen like Babysitter's Club. I think it's a little weird that you haven't seen She's All That, but also that makes sense.
I haven't seen She's All That, and I also saw that and I was like, it's kind of weird that I haven't seen that. So that's a valid. I just seeing this it was this year, right? 2021 when I saw this, or maybe it was the end of last year. I don't remember.
It was last year. It was last year.
Okay, I saw that in 2020, and I still was just like, that's the perfect casting. I have no idea why, but it just works. It was perfect. Yeah.
It does just work.
Yeah, I think the three of them work really well together too. Like they play off of each other super well. And, you know, to bring the story into it, I just want to read the premise for this movie from IMDb because it's one of the most ridiculous things ever. It says, a girl group find themselves in the middle of a conspiracy to deliver subliminal messages through popular music. And this isn't like a new concept because there have been things for years where if you play a record backwards, you hear like messages to Satan and stuff like this. It felt like a huge play on the music industry as a whole. And as someone who majored in music industry, I found this extremely entertaining because I was like, yeah, you know, some parts of the industry are this ridiculous. Maybe not to this extent, but you can imagine people like this existing within the music industry at one point or another.
Yeah, I think having watched this film as like an 11-year-old girl, honestly, I think framed a lot of the way that I view the industry and just like capitalism as a whole. I think it's really interesting because like all three of us, right, like have worked in and around music a lot. And so it's very interesting to look at this film through that lens. And I'm not sure how much of those things people who have not worked in the industry realize are pretty accurate. While it's not coming through like in the actual like hidden messages like in the music, like you can definitely see it in like which artists get famous or get pushed by a label. And that's not even like a modern thing. Like that's always existed, right? Or product placement in music videos, or like you'll see one or two people who are famous start wearing a certain item, and then all of a sudden that thing is like really like popular. And those things are sometimes organic, but very often are planted. And I think that this movie does a really good job of like dissecting that and kind of attacking it, but in a very fun and like tongue-in-cheek manner. I think this film is incredibly intelligent, and it's wild to me that it bombed at the box office because it's so good.
That is crazy. It has like such a cult following now. But
yep.
Shane, you too work in and around the music industry. Were you listening to sort of these like boy band girl group artists at the time of like when this was released in the early 2000s, or was that a thing that you never got into?
Okay, so no, I was as somebody who I feel like if you were to ask me like where am I, it's like I grew up on definitely like punk music. My brothers gave me a bunch of music, and you know how that goes. All that to say, I loved my boy bands where they came in. Huge NSYNC fan, huge Justin Timberlake fan. Man's whole career has just been fantastic. What was the question? I just got really caught up on, do I listen to boy bands? And it's just like,
that was the question.
Yeah. Did you listen to like boy bands and girl groups in like the late 90s, early 2000s?
100%. Next question.
Becky, is it safe to say that you probably did too?
Yeah. I mean, like similarly to Shane, I think it's interesting because like I don't know at what point like you really like broke out and like started like choosing your own music, but like at this point in time, like Shane and I would have already been listening to like punk music, or at least like starting to like move into that direction. I mean, yeah, I was mere months away from starting to go to hardcore shows at the time that this film was released, but I was
getting sent to the guidance counselor for being emo.
At the age of 8, 9?
This is not 8. I was like 10, 11. 9. I was 9. I forgot how old I was.
This movie was in 2001, Shane. Are you sure about that?
Okay.
I was like, I'm older than you.
8. No, so I wasn't. Okay. Give me a couple years before I was getting.
I was 8 when this came out.
I don't know why I thought, okay, to be fair, I don't know why I thought this was like 2003 for a second. Go on. Okay. Ignore me.
This is the podcast where we all learn how old we are.
I think I'm 30.
Time is a construct. It's easy to forget.
I'm 17. Go on.
Oh, no. Gosh, I'm canceled. I'm gonna go yeet myself out of the window now. Like Shane and I would have been like having already like started listening to like punk music, or at least like moving in that direction. But the thing with like pop music at this time is like it was so inescapable, right? Because the internet existed, but it did not exist in the way that we know it today. Like you couldn't just listen to like internet radio. You could listen to like CDs if you had them, or like there were music websites, but there was no escaping what was on like top 40 radio, even if you really wanted to. I feel like it was really hard.
Yeah.
And so watching this as like a critique of the way that the industry like pushes like certain artists, or the way that like girl groups are treated in comparison to like boy bands or male artists, I think is really interesting. I think it's really interesting to look at this film or think about it through the lens of like the things we know now about like Britney Spears, for example.
Becky, to your point that this was inescapable, I specifically remember at some point around this time period getting a CD from McDonald's that was like a split between NSYNC and Britney Spears.
I still
So I don't remember that, but I do remember the Backstreet Boys CDs at Burger King.
Okay.
And I believe that those were like roughly around like the same time.
Probably.
And the Backstreet Boys one, there were 3 of them. There was a red one, a blue one, and a yellow one.
What a time.
Truly. Also hit clips.
Yeah.
In this time frame, what a dumb invention. Like, so not only did you have to buy each clip separately and it took up physical space, but like it was only a 1 minute clip of a song. Why anybody thought that was a good idea to be like, oh, here, pay several dollars for this cartridge that will play you 60 seconds of like a smash hit single. What? Yeah, I don't understand. It's definitely a time. It's interesting to look at like pop music now. And I mean, definitely there are still artists that are like inescapable, right? And like you'll always know who they are. And I think that will always exist. But I just think that not because pop music is less good, but I think that just because of the nature of the internet and like information being readily available, and therefore different types of music and different types of content being just easily available to people, I think that this was like the last like big heyday of like artists who were just like universally like known and popular and just completely inescapable. Like, I think, yeah, like I don't even know what the modern examples of that would be. Like the closest I would say would be like obviously still Beyonce, but she started well before like it became difficult to escape that. Like, I don't know, Cardi B, maybe.
Yeah.
To be fair, Now That's What I Call Music 6 had just come out right around the time of this, and I feel like that got lost as soon as we stopped getting good Now CDs, Now compilations. So
you think it's the music?
I think it's the branding of the music. I think it's the accessibility of the music.
Yeah. I love talking about pop music. Sorry. I was like, we could go on an entirely different.
Yeah. This was just like right in that time frame where the music industry was spending so much money. And like you said, hit clips, totally unnecessary, but someone wanted them, so they made them. And what this shows is just how materialistic everything was too at the time, especially in the physical CD age and all of the product placement, which they just ran with the product placement in this movie. And everything had to be over the top in order for this to work, which I loved, because I feel like with a movie like this, you either have to go all out with it, or it's going to end up taking itself way too seriously and just not come across well.
Yeah. The balance here of it talking about like very serious issues, right? Like tackling capitalism and feminism and in a children's film, right? I think is huge. Like this film is incredibly subversive. It seems like it's doing something very like dumb and gimmicky, but instead what it's doing is actually incredibly smart. And people really missed out on that because people hate women. I think that's why this movie bombed.
I don't understand how this movie could bomb when you start the movie with a song as good as Backdoor Lover.
So good. I feel like that should be the cue to people, right? That this movie is self-aware.
That was my again, not having seen this movie until 2020. I immediately saw that scene and thought like pop star, like, right? Yeah. Andy Samberg. I was just like, okay, cool. It's again self-aware.
It's also surprising that this bombed because it was IP that people already knew, you know?
Yeah, and it's not like it gets very far away from that IP. Like, I don't know if either of you ever watched like the Josie and the Pussycats cartoon or read the comics or read Archie comics, but it follows the basic plot of Josie and the Pussycats, right? Like, it tells their story, but also like they solve a mystery throughout the course of it, which is what they did together. Like, and Josie and the Pussycats was really popular when it was like a cartoon. Granted, this movie was not made for people who were familiar with the IP. I think it was like an attempt to like revitalize it and introduce it to a younger audience.
Okay.
And I think that the things that happened were that the people who went to go see it, I think the parents who took their children to go see this film, their children were a little bit too young to understand why the things were funny. And then I think some of the older people were either not familiar with IP, with like, I don't know. I can't figure it out. But I do think that this movie got unintentionally targeted towards an audience that was a little bit too young.
This would have been for what, I guess? Like, who is the target audience then?
Teenage girls, I guess, at the time.
Yeah, but I think that this film is best targeted at like older teens.
So like mid-80s. Kids born in the mid-80s.
Yeah. Like, I was probably a little young for this movie when it came out. I did like things about it, but I think a lot of that was just like the soundtrack is what really sold it for me in a lot of ways. I definitely did not understand the scathing critiques of capitalism. Like, at the age of 11, like I kind of understood that was a thing. And like, especially like, you know, being into like punk music, I did already kind of have this idea of like, yeah, like anti-commercialism within music, which is interesting because I also was buying a product at that time. Like, I later went on to realize that like the punk music that I was consuming and that I was getting into was also like a very fabricated product that was being sold to me. And in hindsight, I can see that. But at that time, like, I had no idea, right? Like, I was just, you know, I liked the Pussycats because they were different than everybody else. And they like stood their ground and like for their morals. And I was like, yeah. And pop music is dumb. And they give you all this stupid products to buy. And that's bad. Be yourself. I'm unique. And I mean, that's truly like an important message of this film. But like, I think the parts of it that like rip apart, like the music industry and capitalism as we know it, those things definitely went way over my head until I was older.
Yeah, Shane, you mentioned the music earlier, and before we dive into the soundtrack, I want to talk about your thoughts on a band playing a bowling alley.
You know, okay, so first of all, that's totally normal. That didn't faze me at all. Being charged for the shoes for the bowling alley, good touch. But the thing that I feel like I want to point out is actually when they're loading up after the bowling alley, and they're talking about, even though they only made $5, it was probably the best show that they've ever played. I love it in a way that also kind of stung.
I just thought it was very, not necessarily of the time, but bowling alleys were popular still at that time too. I think they're a little less so now. You still see them, but you don't see as many of them. And I know there are some places like on the East Coast where they play at bowling alleys specifically, and that seems to be more of a thing there. So I thought that was a nice little addition to the movie of, hey, here's this local band, but they're playing a bowling alley, not even like an actual venue.
Yeah,
it's not even a bar.
It's great. Yeah, and they're stoked about making $20, but really it only ends up being $5. It's great. And then after they realize that no one seems to be wanting to listen to their demo anyway. They're just like, you know, we just have to do it ourselves. And it's like total punk DIY ethos there. And it's, yeah.
Punk rock icons, Josie and the Pussycats.
Yeah. I know. Another thing I think is really funny is that I was reading into Rachel Lee Cook, her Wikipedia page, and it starts with, I guess she apparently started off as like a child Target model. And the first scene is Too Short on that Target plane, the Target branded plane. I thought it was really funny.
Yeah, that's great. And I know, Becky, you want to talk about the soundtrack a little more, but I want to dive into a little more of the story. I mean, this isn't like a super plot-driven thing. It's just like...
Yeah, like the plot is super simple.
They just go all out with it. Yeah, it's a pretty simple thing, especially for anyone who's like familiar with the music industry. It's like, we know bands and artists really want to get signed, and this is kind of one of the wildest ways to get there.
The scene where Wyatt is like, oh no, I have to find another band. And like he's driving and the Pussycats have just been like outside of this like shop and they get kicked out. And so they're like crossing the street and like he almost hits them and like the music cues and they stop and like the like wind is like blowing their hair and they're just looking like so like photo perfect. And he holds up like the blank CD case in front of it and it's like perfectly framed, like, oh, this would be the cover of the album. Is just like, that scene is so incredible. Like it's so funny. That's absolutely not how it happens, but also at the time there were moments where it did happen like that, right? Like there are definitely lots of artists who have been signed because of the way that they like looked and their ability to like present well as a band, with their like without knowing necessarily if they were going to be able to like be performant as a band. But just like the entire way that it's filmed is hilarious, and it's that scene is so good. It's definitely like in my like top handful of scenes for sure.
Yeah, that's actually almost exactly how I got famous. So
Shane's the most famous person on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Are you?
No.
But the whole look of this movie is just perfect for the story that they're trying to tell, because we haven't even really touched on the subliminal messaging thing, because that comes into play so late into the movie. You're just like, oh, of course. Okay. We're just going to throw one more ridiculous thing in here. Maybe it's like halfway through the movie. I'm not really sure on the timeline.
It's pretty early because that's what happens with Du Jour, right? Is that they start hearing it.
Okay. Right.
And then they're like, hey, we were listening to like, I don't know. It was like
remixes of our songs. We were trying to do remixes of our songs and we heard this really weird thing in the background. Can you explain it? And then Wyatt goes up to the pilot and he goes, he makes some music reference. It's good. And then he puts on the parachute and he jumps out the plane and the pilot jumps out the plane. Then the plane disappears.
Yeah.
So they set it up there, and then it's later in the movie when you get to the actual studio scene, right?
But then, like, it's still like dropped in other places, like
yeah.
They keep changing the trends. So like a new song comes out, and they're like, and the fans change the colors of their clothes. They're like, I can't believe we used to wear red, now we're wearing pink. And then they hear a new song, and they're like, why are we wearing pink? Orange is the new pink, and then they wear orange instead.
Shane, what's your favorite example of this?
You set me up perfectly. The only note that I wrote down is that apparently when I went to go watch this again today, I was going to take notes, but the only note that I wrote was that the quote of Gatorade is the new Snapple. So we'll go with that as my favorite.
Gatorade is the new Snapple. Like, it's so funny because like it never happens quite like that. But it does, right? Like if you look at what people, especially young people, are interested in, like it changes wildly, right? Like from one year to the next as these like new trends are pushed on them. I mean, I'm out here proselytizing for like straight leg and wide leg jeans. And I was a diehard skinny jean wearer. And now look at me. I'm being manipulated by TikTok.
I change the brand of water that I drink like every week. I'm just like, no, like I'm gonna like, just the brand of water bottles I'll buy. I'm just super subjective.
Shane is super like super susceptible to marketing tactics.
Yeah, the algorithms.
I'm gonna go buy 100 Fiji waters right now.
Yeah. Well, no, it's funny because I was when I'm first watching like the subliminal messaging in the movie, I'm like, oh. And then they actually do, like, they're at the aquarium and they have what brand of water it is. But even in there's like there's like whales behind Josie and Alan. But even in the aquarium, it's the brand of water. There's a sign for the branding of water. And I was like, it called me out again.
It's definitely like a you're always being sold something type of thing that this definitely calls attention to. Speaking of that aquarium scene, I love that scene between Alan and Josie, right? When she's like, well, what if I can't do this? I'm like, what if this and what if that? And he's like, you just have to believe in yourself. And she says, well, what if I can't? And he looks at her and he says, I'll just have to believe in you for the both of us. Ah, what a great scene. Great scene.
Oh, yeah. Alan M's a softie. I really
Big. Shane has, for all of the, I almost said viewers, for the new viewers, for all of the listeners who don't quite know Shane has big Alan M energy. And I mean that in the best way possible. Like,
I'm not even going to argue that one.
Like, you're very handsome. You're very tall and lanky. You're very sweet. You sometimes say things that make you sound dumb. And it's not that you're dumb. It's that your brain is thinking about a bajillion other things. And so sometimes you just seem like you're just like living in a different universe, man.
I was just going to say we're both kind of awkward, but that's...
And you're both kind of awkward. Alan M reminds me of a golden retriever, and Shane also kind of reminds me of a golden retriever.
Makes sense.
Yes. Yeah, again, I'm not arguing any of these things. I just don't have much to say about them.
Oh, what's her name? The guy that's supposed to be their agent, like his sister?
Alexandra?
Yeah, when she's on the plane and then and he cuts to her and he's just like, why are you here? And she's like, well, because I was in the comic.
Yeah, I have that written down in my notes.
And he says, what? And then there's no explanation for it. That's so funny. Like, this movie is so self-aware, and it's very just like out there, like, oh, she's just here because she has to come because she's a part of the comic book. And
I literally wrote down that exact quote because it just got me while I was watching this. I was like, yes, this is the comic book stuff that I love to see in what is technically a comic book movie. You know, it's not a superhero movie, but it is technically based on comics.
In the Archie cinematic universe.
Yeah. And this was just so much fun. And, you know, we haven't even really talked about the shift we see with Josie, because she's the one who starts to change the most because of the whole ego trip, subliminal messaging stuff.
Yeah.
And to see her character go through all of that. And then you have, Valerie trying to figure everything out. And then Mel's just kind of doing her thing. Nothing phases her.
She's a great character, right? She seems like she's doing this dumb blonde thing. And she is, but it's never portrayed as negative.
No.
Right? It's always just sometimes people are just like this and that's their personality. And I really appreciate that that this movie could have done the you're a dumb blonde, let's dig at you. And I mean in some ways that is the joke, but it's always a lighthearted poking fun at it, not you're the butt of the joke. This film is very positive.
The Carson Daly scene really shows that when her and Carson Daly are going back and forth with all of their everything that they have in common, and they're like, what's your sign? Oh, I'm Scorpio. What's yours? Cancer. And then he swings the bat at her. And they're just going back and forth. But it eventually ends with her just tricking Carson Daly and then picking up, I think it's a cardboard cutout of Matt Damon, and smacking Carson Daly with it. It's great.
So this came out in 2001. So was this while they were dating?
That's actually what I'm looking up right now.
I think that it was. But
that is far funnier.
And I'm pretty sure that this is while they were dating, unless I'm just way off on my timeline.
They met in 2000.
Yeah, so this is while they were dating. Yeah. And I think the funniest part too is because they're in a different universe, we would probably date. If I didn't have to kill you, we would probably date. Oh, it's so funny. But yeah, no, Josie definitely has the harshest shift in personality, and then diving super negative. And I think that there's a couple of different things that lead to that, right? Her character, I think, is the most self-conscious of the three of them, right? And so I think that makes her a little bit more prone to that. And then I think the second thing is just like, she's the one that they've chosen to be the center, right? So they attempt dividing the other two girls, and then they target her like with these hidden messages the same way that they did everybody else.
I just want to confirm if what I read was correct. Okay. I just read on IMDb that Tara Reid didn't know how to play drums beforehand, so they hired Drew Thomas, who was in bands such as Bold and Youth of Today. I think that's really funny.
Is that who taught her how to play drums?
That is what IMDb is telling me, and that's what I'm trying to confirm right now. But I guess I don't know how the fuck else I would confirm or deny that. Tara Reid started the band's drummer, Melody Valentine, not knowing how to play drums before they filmed. She needed to learn the basics so she could appear to know what she was doing behind the kit. The producers hired Drew Thomas, who was in bands such as Bold, Into Another, and Youth of Today.
Hell yeah, that rules.
It's definitely a little harder to pretend like you know how to play drums versus just kind of pretending to know how to play bass or guitar, because that you can at least kind of just move your fingers and most people won't know what's going on. But with drums, it will like look bad if you don't at least try.
Yeah.
I love that they didn't just hire like some like no-name drum teacher, like they easily could have, right? Like, but instead they're like, you drummer from these hardcore bands, you teach Tara Reid how to play drums and Josie and the Pussycats. That rules.
Yeah. So on the topic of music, Becky, take it away with the soundtrack.
Hell yeah. Okay. The soundtrack to this rips. It's so good. And of course it's good because there's a lot of like real musicians involved in the actual construction of these songs. Like, so first off, Rachel Lee Cook does not sing Josie's parts. That is Kay Hanley. So if you're familiar with Letters to Cleo, that's the voice that you're hearing. That's why that sounds that way. Shane just made this like mind blown face. Shane, is that news? Yeah, is that news for you?
Yeah. That was
like go back and like listen to like the soundtrack and it makes sense. Like I love Letters to Cleo. All three of them did provide backing vocals on all of the tracks, but like the main voice of like Josie, that's Kay Hanley. Adam Duritz from Counting Crows.
And Adam Schlesinger too.
Yeah, like that entire song, like Pretend to Be Nice.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Pour one out for our dude from Fountains of Wayne. But yeah, like so like literally like these songs were performed and written by like Letters to Cleo, Fountains of Wayne, and like the Counting Crows. Babyface, who else is involved in these? Like it's wild when you like really think about it. Like the only one that I think that isn't written by like big names like that is the Josie and the Pussycats song, which is like the end credits are set to that. And that's just because that's the song from the original cartoon.
Yeah, it's the Hanna-Barbera song.
Yeah, which rules just in and of its own. But yeah, like I could even go like I could do a track by track of this in all honesty, like if you really wanted to. Three Small Words is the opening track on the soundtrack, which I believe is also the opening of the film, right? And I think it just
sings. I don't think the opening. I think the opening of the film is still Jujor song.
Oh, sorry. I meant not the opening of the film, but like the opening credits scene.
Oh yeah.
Is Three Small Words.
Because it's also the opening of the soundtrack, because I guess they don't have the Jujor. I'm looking at it now. They don't have the Jujor songs on it. So go on.
Yeah, no, the soundtrack is not in order of appearance into the film. But yeah, that one rules. Spin Around rules. Pretend to Be Nice rules. I Wish You Well. I Wish You Well rules. What are the other songs that I like on that? I mean, I like all of them. I think, Shapeshifter, that song rules. And that song, the like primary writer on that song is Kay Hanley. And I think that even sounds that way, right? Like it sounds kind of like a little bit like a Letters to Cleo song. You're a Star and Spin Around are very heavily written by Adam Duritz. And I think they very much sound kind of like other songs that he's written, like either for other movies or like they on their own have big like Counting Crows energy within those songs. And I think that's cool, right? Because all of these songs sound like songs that this band would have written and performed. But also if you separate them from the film, they definitely, you can see like a heavy hand from the people who wrote them. And I like that they used real musicians to write real songs for this, rather than it just being like an afterthought. Like, oh, we made this movie about a band. Oh no, the band needs to make music. And the songs definitely, I think, stand on their own pretty well. And then of course, like Du Jour Around the World and Backdoor Lover, I think are incredible tracks and are just so incredibly funny. I can't believe that there are people out there who don't like this movie.
Yeah, that's kind of wild.
People really hate women.
Do people not like this movie?
Yeah, it was a huge flop. I think Roger Ebert said that this movie is not dumber than the Spice Girls, but it's just as dumb as the Spice Girls, and that's bad enough. Which also is a bad take because the Spice Girls rule.
So an old white man didn't like it.
Yeah, a lot of old white men did not like it. Its production budget was like $30 million and it only made like 14 million. So it like didn't even make back what it cost to make it.
It might have by now, but that's still very iffy.
Yeah, like Josie and the Pussycats is like the band's band of movies, right? Like where it took a long time for it to make it back. Yeah, like at the time where it would have been important for people to pick up and understand this movie, it didn't happen, but it happened later for them. It's kind of like getting famous posthumously is like what happened here.
It just needs to have its 20-year anniversary tour.
Right now.
20-year anniversary tour this year. That's why we're here.
So question for both of you then. Because of how massive Riverdale has become on the CW, and they've done spin-offs like I think it was Katie Keene or something like that, but they were like talking about doing a Josie spin-off at one point. I don't know if it's still in the works, but do you feel like a movie like this would resonate more now with a younger demographic just because of how popular a bunch of the IP is on the CW?
I think that plus I think people who are younger and younger are more aware of, Comrade Becky just really came to like shit talk fucking capitalism apparently, but like, cause like I can't stop like, but I think younger and younger people are becoming more and more aware of like the ways that like capitalism as a societal structure has like failed us and how it like manipulates people. And so I think that because people are more aware of that at a younger and younger age, I do think that this would resonate with like larger audiences. I also think people are much more aware of, I think that if this movie came out today, I don't think that it would flop the way that it did in 2001. I think this movie was too far ahead of its time.
I think it might have been too close to this kind of stuff actually happening, like pop stars being this massive. So maybe we needed like that time away from artists kind of being treated this way in order for it to really resonate with people.
Yeah, I definitely think that this movie came out while it was happening. And sometimes it's hard to see something in the moment. Like it takes like being removed from it a little bit to look back and be like, oh yeah, like that was wild. And so I don't know how much some of the things that are like very specific, you know, to like boy band culture or girl group culture or like just early 2000s nostalgia like pieces. I don't know how much of that would work, but like I think if it were updated to be like more modern like music styles type of thing, then like I absolutely think that a show on like CW that was like a Josie centric show, I think could absolutely work. I have no idea. I'm trying like who would even play
the characters from Riverdale who played them.
Oh, are these all characters that have been introduced into the show?
Yes.
Okay. I don't watch this show.
Sorry, Shane and I both nodded and did not say yes.
I've never seen the show either. I don't know why I nodded so intently.
I know that there's been some type of reference to Josie and the Pussycats in the show, but I didn't know how strong it was.
They were an actual band in the show already.
Okay. I only know that I talk about this movie a lot, but I had said something about Josie and the Pussycats. And I said something about it being a comic book. And then somebody's like, oh, like in the Archie, or I didn't realize they had their own comics in the Archie comics is what they said. And I was like, oh, so you know that it's Archie. And they were like, yeah. And I was like, but you've never seen the movie and you've never read Archie comics. And they're like, no. And I was like, then how do you know that? And they're like, oh, because of Riverdale. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I feel like I've missed the boat on that. Like, I feel like it's too late for me to get into that show.
There's a lot that's happened. It would be a lot to take in.
I'll get into the next thing. What's the next thing? Falcon and Winter Soldier.
It's been good.
Is the next thing that I'm supposed to be watching.
Yeah, don't worry. Disney has you covered with about 800 upcoming shows.
Yeah, there's too much content. I can't.
Oh, I love it. It's just the right amount of content for me.
Yeah, I do think something like this would do a lot better now, especially with streaming services. I could easily see, like, if there were to be a new version of Josie and the Pussycats, it could go straight to streaming. And I could see that being like a hit movie for Netflix or something. You know, I don't know where it would go necessarily, but I think
it would go straight to the top.
Yes.
If it's as heavy-handed as the 2001 movie is too, modernized to the Riverdale theme, I think it would do well.
Well, Shane, do you have any final thoughts about Josie?
Oh, it's great. It's a great piece of cinema.
Becky, how about you?
Cinematic masterpiece.
Yes. So I've been trying something new here where we recommend something for the listeners to check out if they enjoyed Josie and the Pussycats. And by the way, if you haven't watched this movie, please go watch it because there's so much that happens in it that we didn't even touch on in this that makes it so entertaining. But Becky, I know you have a recommendation for everyone.
Yeah, I have like a couple. I think there's a lot of different things about this movie to like and to enjoy. I think that if you like the music in this movie and you like the way that music is worked into the film, because it's not just in the background and they're not just playing it, it's like a part of the plot very frequently. If you haven't seen Sing Street, definitely watch Sing Street. That's another one of my favorite films. I would not be mad to come back and talk about that movie. If you really enjoy the like anti-capitalism and the like really critiquing the way that women are treated in society, especially in like business as a whole, or like any type of like industry, right? Like Showgirls, I think is a very clear next step from this film. I think I would love to see somewhere do a double feature where like the first film is Josie and the Pussycats, and then there's like an intermission, and then the second film of the evening is Showgirls. I think that would rule. And then if you like the like friendship, girl power, like three girls in a band writing songs about being in a band, then you should listen to The Chicks. That's my recommendation there. Specifically the track Long Way Around from that record. Those are my recommendations there. Okay.
So I feel like one thing that I really do appreciate about this movie is, even if they're not trying extremely hard to, there are a lot of like basic punk themes that I think come up throughout it that really get me excited, because it's just thrown into what was like kind of supposed to be like a young teen movie. I think about how Becky was saying how it pissed off a white man, an old white guy. So I don't know. I'm thinking about like just if this movie did piss off the right people, and if the commentary really did upset people, then my recommendation, and if you appreciate that, and if that's the part about this that does it for you, you should listen to the new Lil Nas X song, because I like how many people it's upset on the internet so far, and I think
hell yeah,
punk and super,
and it's good,
cool. And it's just good. You know, I love the free speech talk around this right now, and how people want to complain. People either want to defend their own free speech or they want to shut down someone else's. And I love that anybody that's been trying to shut him down so far, he is just completely obliterated. And that's my recommendation.
Love it.
My brain didn't even like do that. But yeah, I think that's like a really interesting thing, right? Where like this movie is very much like if you're going to treat women this way when they're involved in the music industry, right? Because there's a lot of that. Or if you're just going to create like treat musicians this way, right? Like, or treat like fans this way, right? Or as like people to be sold a product to all of the time, then we're going to make a movie about it. And like people really did not like that. And it's like, well, you're just upset because we're doing the thing that you said that we had to do. Which is exactly what Lil Nas X does in like that Call Me By Your Name video, right? Like it's this very much like, okay, well, like you can't keep telling queer people that they're going to hell. And then when we like make this video in hell, like, right. And then you're like, oh, how dare you? And it's like, well, this is where you said I belong. Like, I think that that's like a really interesting,
it's so fucking cool.
Yeah, I think that that's a really interesting comparison. I really like Lil Nas X. I think watching like that career is incredible.
Yeah.
And definitely interesting to talk about. We should come on and talk about that album at like when we get a chance. I would love to be able to do that one day. But yeah, Deanna, link the video in the show notes, baby.
Yeah, I will. And I'm going to go in a completely different direction with my recommendation and recommend a Goofy movie.
Oh, hell yeah.
If you just want some like ridiculous fun and some fun songs, you know, that's perfect.
I think that that's a good recommendation too. Yeah, I was...
Shudder. Sorry. Oh.
So good. I love that movie so much. I really do. It's very good. I came like super prepared with my recommendations because I was listening to the Men in Black episode with friend of mine and Shane's and Deanna's and friend of the podcast, Janice. I don't listen to all of the episodes. I wish that I did, but I listen to too many podcasts. I need to start like clipping them out, right? Like making priorities because I'm subscribed to too many. But if there's like, if you're talking about an IP I really enjoy, or if it's a guest that I either know personally or I just think is like funny or I've heard them on the podcast before, I always try to listen to those. And so I was listening to that episode yesterday when I was driving out to the beach, and I was like, oh man, yeah, I forgot. Deanna said she was going to do this recommendations thing.
I forget.
So I got to be prepared for Josie.
I'm like, oh, I didn't tell this person because I keep forgetting who I've told and who I've done it with and who I haven't yet because I've done so many episodes lately. I think 1 week I've recorded like 6 podcasts and lost all track of time and space and everything. But thank you both for coming on to talk about Josie. I'm glad I finally watched this because it was way more fun than I expected because I didn't really know what to expect going into it, but I'm glad I watched it.
I told you.
Too fun.
So thank you both.
I don't think I've introduced the movie to anybody who didn't like it.
I feel like a lot of people that the three of us know would really, really enjoy this movie if they haven't seen it. So anyone listening, I probably know most of you who are listening, go watch this if you haven't yet.
Thanks.
Hell yeah.
All right, everyone. That does it for this episode of Welcome to Geekdom. If you want to support the podcast, you can do so through our Patreon. If you want to follow us on socials, you can do so at GeekdomPod on Twitter and at Welcome to Geekdom on Instagram and Facebook. And as always, thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day.